A lonely billionaire, Alejandro Garcia, hires a pizza delivery girl, Fernanda Lopez, to pretend to be his fiancée for the Easter holiday. But he never imagined that, in a carefully planned game, what happens when improvisation starts to change all the rules. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Alejandro sat in his lavish penthouse, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow on the opulent decor that surrounded him. The room was adorned with abstract art, elegant furniture, and a grand piano that stood silent in the corner, much like the man who owned it. Despite the luxury enveloping him, Alejandro felt an emptiness that no amount of wealth could fill. He stared out over the city of Madrid, the bustling streets below a stark contrast to his isolated existence. The view was breathtaking, yet it did little to alleviate the heaviness in his chest. His thoughts were interrupted by the sharp knock of his assistant, Ana, who entered with a clipboard in hand. "Alejandro, we need to discuss the family gathering for Easter," she said, her tone brisk yet respectful. He turned to her, irritation flickering across his face. "Do we have to? You know how I feel about these gatherings." "Unfortunately, yes. Your family is expecting you to bring a fiancé," she replied, her eyes narrowing slightly as she adjusted her glasses. "They've been asking about your love life, and this is the perfect opportunity for you to present someone special." Alejandro scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Special? I don't have anyone special, Ana, and I don't plan on pretending to be in a relationship just to appease them." Ana sighed, her patience wearing thin. "You know how your mother is. If you show up alone, she'll start making assumptions, and then it'll be a whole other mess. Just think of it as a temporary arrangement. You could hire someone to play the part." As her words sank in, Alejandro felt a flicker of intrigue. The idea of hiring someone to pose as his fiancée was absurd yet oddly appealing. He could avoid the endless questions and judgments that accompanied his family gatherings. "You really think that would work?" he asked, his brows furrowing in contemplation. "Absolutely. Just set some ground rules. It doesn't have to be complicated." Anna's expression softened as she saw the gears turning in Alejandro's mind. "You're a billionaire, after all. You can afford to make this happen." As he leaned forward, contemplating the logistics of such a plan, he couldn't help but let out a low chuckle. "I can't believe I'm actually considering this." Meanwhile, a world away, Fernanda sped through the bustling streets of Madrid on her vintage motorcycle, the wind whipping through her hair. With a smile plastered on her face, she navigated through traffic, delivering pizzas with a sense of purpose that made her heart race. She thrived on the thrill of her job, the freedom it granted her, and the small adventures that came with each delivery. "Pizza delivery for Mr. Romero," she called out, handing over a steaming box to a grateful customer. "Enjoy your meal." As she hopped back onto her bike, she couldn't help but daydream about a life beyond pizza deliveries. A life filled with adventure and spontaneity. A life she desperately craved. Her thoughts drifted to distant lands she longed to explore. Beaches with crystal-clear waters, bustling markets in foreign cities, and the thrill of unfamiliar terrains beneath her wheels. "One day," she whispered to herself, promising to break free from the monotony of her current life. Just as she was about to take off, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Pulling it out, she saw a notification from her social media account. "New message," it read. Curious, she clicked on it, revealing a message from someone named Alejandro. The name was unfamiliar, but the profile picture showed a strikingly handsome man. "Hi, Fernanda. I came across your profile, and I have an unusual proposition for you. Would you be interested in a temporary arrangement as my fiancée for the Easter holiday? Compensation will be generous. Let me know if you're interested." Fernanda's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Was this some kind of joke? She read the message again, trying to decipher whether it was a scam or a legitimate offer. The thought of playing a role as a fiancé, albeit fake, intrigued her. The idea of stepping into a world so different from her own, even if only for a short time, was intoxicating. She couldn't resist the allure of adventure. This might just be the break she had been dreaming of. After a moment's hesitation, she typed back, "Hi, Alejandro. I'm intrigued. Let's discuss the details. Back in his penthouse, Alejandro watched as his phone lit up with a notification. He picked it up, his heart racing slightly as he saw Fernanda's name on the screen. He quickly opened the message, feeling a rush of excitement mixed with anxious anticipation. Through the exchange of messages, they arranged a time to meet. Alejandro couldn't shake the feeling that this was a leap into the unknown, but the thought of having someone by his side for the Easter gathering was too tempting to dismiss. As the days passed, they communicated back and forth, negotiating terms and conditions. Alejandro found himself increasingly charmed by Fernanda's free-spirited personality, which shone through in her messages. She had an infectious enthusiasm that made him smile, something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Okay, so what are the ground rules?" Fernanda asked during their first phone call, her voice bright and cheerful. Alejandro cleared his throat, his usual stern demeanor slipping momentarily. "First, we need to keep up appearances. You'll be my fiancée in front of my family, but outside of that, we can maintain our own lives. There will be no emotional entanglements." "Understood," Fernanda replied, her playful tone evident. "And what about clothes? Am I supposed to show up in a ball gown or something?" He chuckled, the sound foreign yet pleasant. "No ball gowns, I promise. Just wear something nice, something that fits your style. We'll have a public appearance and then a family dinner. It's not as formal as you might think." "Sounds like a plan," she said, her excitement palpable even through the phone. "And what's in it for me?" Alejandro hesitated, then replied, "A generous payment for your time, of course. But more than that, consider it an adventure. A chance to step into a different world, if only for a little while." Fernanda's laughter echoed through the line, infectious and bright. "Adventure? I'm all in. Let's make it unforgettable." As their conversation continued, Alejandro felt an unexpected sense of lightness. Perhaps this arrangement wouldn't be so burdensome after all. The prospect of having someone vibrant and spontaneous like Fernanda by his side brought a flicker of hope to his otherwise monotonous existence. Little did they know, the journey ahead would lead them both down a path of unexpected revelations, transforming their lives in ways neither could anticipate. Fernanda stood outside the towering entrance of Alejandro's penthouse, her heart racing with a blend of excitement and nervousness. The vibrant outfit she had chosen hugged her curves perfectly, a bright fabric that contrasted sharply with the muted colors of the building. As she looked up at the imposing structure, she took a deep breath to steady herself. Today was the day they would make their first public appearance as an engaged couple, and she was determined to make it memorable. When the massive doors swung open, Alejandro stood there, his expression a mix of surprise and disapproval. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his dark hair slicked back, but there was something almost comical about the way his brows furrowed at the sight of her. "What are you wearing?" he asked, his voice low and gruff. Fernanda twirled playfully, the fabric of her dress swirling around her legs. "Isn't it perfect? I thought we should make an impression." Alejandro's lips pressed into a thin line. "We need to blend in, not stand out like a sore thumb." "Oh, come on, Alejandro. This is a chance to have some fun," she countered, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Besides, it's not like you're exactly the life of the party." He sighed, shaking his head, but there was a hint of amusement behind his stern facade. "Let's just try not to draw too much attention." As they stepped into the lavish elevator, the tension between them was palpable. Alejandro leaned against the wall, arms crossed, while Fernanda bounced slightly on her feet, her energy filling the confined space. The elevator chimed as it reached the ground floor, and as the doors slid open, Fernanda took a deep breath, stepping out into the bustling world of Madrid. Their first destination was a high-end restaurant where Alejandro's family had arranged a brunch gathering. The atmosphere inside was filled with laughter and clinking glasses, a stark contrast to the stillness of Alejandro's penthouse. Fernanda felt a flutter of nerves as they approached the table where Alejandro's mother, a striking woman with an air of authority, sat with a few relatives. As they arrived, Alejandro's mother looked up with a scrutinizing gaze. "Alejandro, is this your fiancée?" she asked, her tone laced with skepticism. "Mom, this is Fernanda," he introduced, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from his mother. "She's my fiancée." Fernanda offered a bright smile, extending her hand. "It's such a pleasure to meet you. Alejandro has told me so much about you." His mother's eyes narrowed slightly as she shook Fernanda's hand. "Has he? I hope it was all good things." "Of course," Fernanda replied, her voice cheerful. "He's been very kind to me." Alejandro's mother did not seem convinced. "We'll see about that," she muttered under her breath, but Fernanda, ever the optimist, chose to ignore the comment. The brunch commenced, and as they sat down, Alejandro's relatives began to engage in small talk, and Fernanda found herself surprisingly at ease. She exchanged stories and laughter with them, her natural charm shining through. However, Alejandro remained distant, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for an escape route. "Why are you so serious?" Fernanda whispered to him, leaning close. "I'm not serious, I'm just focused," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to maintain our cover." "Relax, Alejandro. Just enjoy the moment," she urged, her tone playful. "Live a little." The brunch unfolded with a mixture of awkward silences and uproarious laughter, but Alejandro remained tightly wound, following his meticulously planned schedule. As the meal progressed, he kept glancing at his watch, clearly agitated by the relaxed pace of the gathering. "Fernanda, we should probably wrap this up soon," he said, his voice strained. "Why? What's the rush?" she asked, a playful smirk on her lips. "I have things to do," he replied, not meeting her gaze. "Oh, please. You can't possibly have anything more important than spending time with your family," she teased, nudging him playfully. "Family obligations are different, Fernanda," he replied, finally looking at her, his expression serious. "These gatherings can easily spiral into chaos if I don't manage them properly. Let's just enjoy ourselves for a bit longer, shall we?" she insisted, a spark of defiance in her eyes. As the brunch continued, Alejandro's mother began to ask more probing questions about their relationship. "So, Fernanda, how did you two meet?" she inquired, her voice dripping with curiosity. "We met through an unusual circumstance," Fernanda replied, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plausible story. "I delivered a pizza to his penthouse and, well, one thing led to another." Alejandro shot her a warning look, but Fernanda continued. "He was so impressed by my pizza delivery skills that he decided to hire me." She winked, playing up the charm. "Is that so?" his mother observed, her expression still skeptical. "And what do you do for a living?" "I'm a pizza delivery girl, but I aspire to travel the world and experience life to the fullest," she said, her voice brightening with enthusiasm. "Traveling? At your age?" his mother questioned, raising an eyebrow. "And what kind of future do you envision with my son, who is a successful businessman?" A brief silence fell over the table, and Fernanda felt the weight of the scrutiny. "I believe that life is about sharing experiences and supporting each other's dreams," she said confidently, meeting the older woman's gaze. "Alejandro has his own journey, and I admire that about him." As the conversation shifted, Fernanda could sense Alejandro relaxing slightly, though his fingers drummed nervously on the table. The brunch wound down, and Alejandro's mother leaned in closer to Fernanda, her voice low and measured. "Just remember, dear, my son has a reputation to uphold. It's not just about him. It's about our family," she said, her eyes locking onto Fernanda's with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. Fernanda nodded, her smile unwavering. "I understand completely. I'm here to support him, and I promise to do my best to be a good fiancé." After the meal, they excused themselves from the table, and once outside, Alejandro sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping slightly. "That went better than I expected," he admitted, a hint of surprise in his voice. "See? I told you," she beamed, her confidence soaring. "We make a great team." He glanced over at her, a flicker of something softer in his eyes. "You were impressive with my mother. I didn't expect you to handle her that well." "Thank you. I guess I have a knack for these things," she replied, brushing off the compliment. "So, what's next on our schedule, Mr. Businessman?" He hesitated, glancing back toward the restaurant as if contemplating the next move. I suppose we should head to the gallery opening. It's part of the family's events today. Gallery opening? That sounds fun, she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. It's not meant to be fun, he replied, the corners of his mouth twitching. But I suppose you could make it more bearable. As they walked together, their contrasting personalities began to blend, creating a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Alejandro's structured approach to life collided amusingly with Fernanda's spontaneous spirit, and for the first time, he found himself intrigued by this unexpected partnership. Just promise me one thing, he said as they approached his car. Don't call attention to our engagement too much, at least not until we're certain this is solid. Fernanda laughed. No promises, but I'll try to keep the shenanigans to a minimum, at least for now. He couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm, realizing that perhaps this fake engagement might just lead to something more than either of them had anticipated. As the days rolled on, the atmosphere in Alejandro's penthouse shifted subtly, like the gentle turning of a page in a well-loved book. Fernanda, with her infectious laughter and vibrant spirit, had managed to breach the walls Alejandro had meticulously constructed around himself. They found themselves gravitating toward each other more often, sharing brief moments that felt surprisingly intimate amidst the pretense of their engagement. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of pretending to be the perfect couple for Alejandro's family, they found themselves on the balcony, the Madrid skyline twinkling beneath a blanket of stars. The gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from the garden below, creating an almost magical ambience that enveloped them. Do you ever look at the stars and wonder what's out there? Fernanda asked, leaning against the railing, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. She had changed into a comfortable, oversized sweater, a stark contrast to the elegant dress she had worn earlier that day. Alejandro, standing beside her, glanced up, momentarily lost in thought. I don't really think about it, he replied, his tone devoid of the enthusiasm that Fernanda had hoped for. I have too many things on my mind. Like what? Fernanda turned to him, her interest piqued. You're a billionaire, Alejandro. What could possibly weigh on your shoulders that a little stargazing couldn't fix? He smirked, a hint of amusement flickering in his dark eyes. You make it sound so simple. But wealth doesn't equate to happiness, Fernanda. It can be lonely up here. He gestured to the opulence surrounding them, the gleaming glass and chrome of his penthouse. People see the money and the status and think they know me, but they don't. They only see what I allow them to see. Fernanda's expression softened. I get that. People often see me as just a pizza girl, but there's so much more I want to explore, to experience. I dream of traveling the world, tasting different cuisines, meeting new people, finding out who I really am. Alejandro looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time since their charade began, there was a fire in her eyes, a passion that ignited something dormant within him. Why haven't you done it then? She shrugged, a hint of sadness creeping into her voice. Life gets in the way. Bills to pay, responsibilities. It's easier to stay in my comfort zone, you know? But I want more. I want to live, not just exist. He could sense the longing in her words, a reflection of his own concealed desires. Maybe you should. We only get one life, and it's too short to be stuck in a rut. Are you planning to do the same? Fernanda challenged, her gaze piercing through him. You could break free from all this, Alejandro. You could travel, find joy outside of these walls. Maybe, he conceded, his voice barely above a whisper. His heart raced as an unexpected vulnerability washed over him. But it's easier said than done. I've built this fortress around myself for a reason. For a moment, silence enveloped them, the weight of their shared confessions hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. Then, almost instinctively, Alejandro leaned closer, drawn to her warmth. Maybe we could explore together. This weekend, perhaps? Just escape for a while. Fernanda's heart skipped a beat. Are you serious? Why not? It's not like I have a real fiancé to worry about, he joked lightly, but there was an underlying sincerity in his tone. Besides, you could use a break from pizza deliveries. Her laughter rang out, a melodious sound that melted away the tension. I'd love that. Just the two of us, away from prying eyes. Think of the adventures we could have. As the conversation flowed, a sense of ease settled between them, as if they had known each other for years instead of just a few days. The stars twinkled above, witnessing the gradual shift in their dynamic, the blossoming of something deeper than either had anticipated. Later that night, as they prepared to retire to their respective rooms, Alejandro's heart raced inexplicably. He brushed off the feeling, attributing it to the excitement of their planned escape. But as he lay in bed, thoughts of Fernanda flooded his mind. Her laughter, her dreams, her spirit, and he felt a pull that he couldn't quite understand. The next evening, they decided to take a stroll through a nearby park, the moon casting a silvery glow on the path ahead. The air was crisp, and the world felt alive around them, a stark contrast to the sterile confines of his penthouse. They walked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing, sending sparks of electricity through Alejandro's body. "Look at those stars," Fernanda said, pointing upwards. "It's like they're dancing just for us." Alejandro chuckled softly, but his heart raced at the warmth radiating from her presence. "You really believe in that kind of magic, don't you?" "Why shouldn't I? Life is too short to dismiss the beauty around us. You should try it sometime." She gave him a playful nudge, her eyes sparkling with mischief. He looked at her, his expression serious. "Maybe I will, if you promise to show me how." They stopped by a small pond, the surface shimmering like glass beneath the moonlight. Without thinking, Alejandro took a step closer to Fernanda, his heart pounding in his chest. "You've changed my perspective on so many things, Fernanda. I didn't expect to find someone like you." Her breath hitched as she met his gaze, something unspoken hanging in the air between them. "I feel the same way," she whispered, her cheeks flushing under his intense scrutiny. The moment felt electric, charged with an energy that neither could ignore. Alejandro's instincts kicked in, and before he could think twice, he leaned in, capturing her lips with his in a tentative kiss. It was soft, hesitant, yet filled with an urgency that took them both by surprise. Fernanda melted into the kiss, her heart soaring. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. A connection that transcended their initial arrangement. But just as quickly, Alejandro pulled away, a look of shock crossing his face. "What just happened?" he murmured, stepping back as if burned. Fernanda's heart sank, confusion clouding her thoughts. I thought we shared a moment." "I don't know what I was thinking," he said, his brow furrowing in distress. "This was supposed to be fake, just a job. I can't let this complicate things." She felt a pang of disappointment, but tried to mask it with a smile. "I understand. It was just a kiss, after all." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. "Let's just forget it happened," he said, his voice strained as he turned away, leaving Fernanda standing by the pond, her mind racing. The following morning dawned bright and clear, but the tension between them was palpable. As Alejandro prepared for another day of pretending, an unexpected knock at the door shattered the fragile peace. "Who could that be?" he muttered, his brow furrowing as he opened the door. Standing there, arms crossed and a scowl on her face, was his ex-girlfriend, Isabella. "What are you doing here?" Alejandro asked, trying to mask his surprise. "I came to see you, Alejandro. We need to talk," she replied, her voice dripping with disdain as her eyes narrowed at Fernanda, who had just emerged from the kitchen, holding a mug of coffee. "Who's this?" Isabella asked, her tone laced with jealousy. "A friend," Alejandro replied curtly, stepping protectively in front of Fernanda. Isabella smirked, her gaze shifting between them. "A friend? Or a little more than that? You know people talk, Alejandro. What's going on with you two?" Fernanda's heart dropped as she exchanged worried glances with Alejandro. This was the last thing they needed. Her presence threatened to expose their carefully constructed facade. "Whatever you think you know, Isabella, it's not true," Alejandro said firmly, his jaw clenched with irritation. "Is it not? Because I have a feeling this little arrangement of yours is about to blow up in your face." Her piercing gaze bore into Fernanda, who felt the weight of the threat hanging in the air. "Stay out of this, Isabella," Alejandro warned, his voice low and dangerous. But Isabella stepped forward, her tone cold and calculated. "You can't hide forever, Alejandro. I won't let you. I know your family is expecting a fiancé, and I will make sure they find out the truth." Fernanda's heart raced as panic set in. She realized the fragile illusion they had built was teetering on the brink of collapse, and she had no idea how they would navigate the storm that was brewing. Fernanda stood at the entrance of Alejandro's penthouse, her heart racing as she faced the unexpected presence of his ex-girlfriend, Isabella. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and the air felt charged as if a storm were brewing. Isabella, with her striking features and poised demeanor, exuded confidence that only amplified Fernanda's insecurities. "Alejandro, darling," Isabella cooed, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "I see you found a new little plaything." She glanced at Fernanda, her eyes narrowing. How quaint. Fernanda felt a rush of indignation and insecurity, suddenly aware of how out of place she felt in Alejandro's luxurious world. She exchanged a glance with Alejandro, whose expression was a mix of annoyance and protectiveness. "Isabella," he said curtly, "this isn't the time or place for your games." "Oh, games?" Isabella laughed, a sound that felt sharp and cutting. "You think this is a game? You know I care about you, Alejandro. You can't possibly believe this. This girl is what you want." Fernanda's heart sank at Isabella's words. It was one thing to be a hired fiancé. It was another to be compared to someone who had been a significant part of Alejandro's life. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "I'm not here to compete with anyone," she said firmly. "Alejandro and I have a connection you clearly don't understand." Isabella's smile faltered for a moment, and she turned her attention back to Alejandro. "You know I'm the one who fits in your world, Alejandro. You're just pretending with her. You don't want to go back to the loneliness, do you?" Alejandro visibly stiffened, his jaw clenching. "Enough, Isabella. I hired Fernanda to help me out, and I won't have you trying to manipulate us. You need to leave." Isabella stepped closer, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "What if I told you I know how to make you happy again? I can give you everything you've lost. Alejandro, you can't deny we had something real." Fernanda felt the walls of her confidence starting to crumble. She could see Alejandro's discomfort, but the doubt crept in like a shadow, darkening her thoughts. Was she just a temporary distraction? Did he truly want her? Or was she merely a stand-in until something better came along? "Isabella, this is not going to work," Alejandro said, his tone firm, but Fernanda could sense the struggle beneath his words. "You need to accept that we've moved on." "Moved on?" Isabella laughed again, this time bitterly. "You think you can just replace me? I know you, Alejandro. You're not the man you pretend to be with her. You're still that lonely billionaire hiding behind walls." With a rush of anger, Fernanda stepped between them. "You don't know anything about him. You don't know how hard he's worked to get where he is, or how much he's fought to let anyone in. You may have shared a past, but it's not your future." The fire in her words caught Alejandro by surprise, and for a moment, he felt a swell of admiration for her courage. But Isabella wasn't finished. "What a dramatic little scene. You really think this is love? Just wait until the real world comes crashing down on you both." Fernanda's heart raced as she felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. She turned to Alejandro, searching his eyes for reassurance. "Is this true? Am I just a passing fancy?" Alejandro reached for her hand, squeezing it tightly. "You are not just a passing fancy, Fernanda. I hired you for a reason, and it's more than just a facade. I see you. I want to know you, to understand you." Isabella scoffed. "How romantic. But tell me, Alejandro, what happens when the holiday is over and she goes back to her boring life delivering pizzas? You really think she can fit into yours?" Fernanda felt the heat of embarrassment creeping up her neck. She had always dreamed of adventure, of stepping into a world beyond her mundane existence, but was she really prepared for the challenges that came with it? The doubts gnawed at her, and she could feel the cracks in her facade beginning to widen. "Alejandro, she started, but he interrupted her. "Do you really think I care what others think of us?" he asked, his voice low and intense. I don't want to go back to feeling alone, and being with you has changed that for me. What we have is real, regardless of what anyone else believes." Isabella's expression shifted to one of desperation. "Alejandro, please don't do this. I can change. We can go back to what we had. Just give me another chance." Fernanda's heart ached at the sight of the woman she had come to see as a rival, a woman who still held a piece of Alejandro's heart. But she also felt a surge of determination rise within her. She wouldn't let Isabella's words dictate her worth. "You need to leave, Isabella. This isn't about you anymore. Alejandro deserves to make his own choices." Isabella took a step back, her expression shifting from anger to realization. "You think this is over? You'll see, Alejandro. You'll regret this." With that, Isabella turned on her heel and strode out of the penthouse, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Fernanda felt the tension linger in the air, a thick cloud of uncertainty hanging over them. She glanced at Alejandro, who was still processing the confrontation. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern etching his features. Fernanda took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm fine. I don't know what to think anymore. You have a history with her, Alejandro. It's hard not to feel like I'm just a placeholder." "Fernanda," he said, stepping closer and holding her gaze, "you are not a placeholder. You are the first person in a long time who makes me feel alive. I hired you to play a part, yes, but you've become so much more to me." Her heart fluttered at his words, but the doubts lingered. "But what if it's just the thrill of the moment? What if I'm not who you really want?" Alejandro's expression softened. "You're right that this is complicated, but I want to figure it out with you. I want to get away from all this, to just be with you without distractions." Fernanda felt a spark of hope ignite within her. "What do you mean?" "Let's take a trip," he suggested, his dark eyes brightening with the idea. "Just the two of us. We can go to the beach, get away from all this chaos, and reconnect without the noise of the world." She hesitated for a moment, weighing the possibilities. It sounded perfect, but the fear of being hurt again loomed over her. And what if it doesn't change anything? Alejandro stepped closer, his voice earnest. "Then we'll figure it out together. I don't want to lose what we've started. I want to explore this connection, and I need you to trust me." Fernanda's chest tightened at his sincerity. Deep down, she longed for that escape, that chance to explore the burgeoning feelings between them without outside interference. "Okay," she said, finding her courage. "Let's go to the beach." A smile broke across Alejandro's face, and she felt a rush of warmth at the sight. "I promise you won't regret it. We'll take the weekend to forget everything else and just focus on us." As they began to plan their impromptu getaway, Fernanda felt a sense of excitement bubbling within her. Perhaps this weekend would be the turning point in their relationship, a chance to discover the depth of their feelings free from the burdens of Alejandro's past. They exchanged smiles, a silent agreement forming between them. In that moment, as they prepared to embark on their journey, Fernanda felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the adventure she had always dreamed of, and perhaps, just perhaps, it would lead to something more profound than she had ever imagined. Alejandro paced the marble floor of his penthouse, the weight of his emotions pressing heavily upon him. The walls, adorned with modern art and expensive decor, felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. He had never cared much for the opinions of others, but the rumors swirling around Fernanda had ignited a fire of protectiveness within him. He clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he thought of his ex-girlfriend's cruel intentions. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, his voice echoing in the empty space. How could she do this to Fernanda? His assistant, Marcos, entered with a worried expression, sensing the storm brewing within Alejandro. "Sir, I just received a call from the media. They're asking about the rumors regarding Ms. Fernanda. It seems your ex has been quite vocal," he informed, carefully choosing his words. Alejandro's anger flared. "What exactly has she said?" His voice was low, almost a growl. Marcos hesitated. "She's suggesting that Fernanda is only after your money and that your engagement is nothing but a publicity stunt." A bitter laugh escaped Alejandro's lips, filled with incredulity. Unbelievable. She would stoop this low? He rubbed his temples, trying to ease the tension that was building. I need to do something. Meanwhile, across town, Fernanda sat on her bed, her heart heavy with doubt. The vibrant colors of her room, filled with posters of far-off places and dream destinations, felt dull against the backdrop of her swirling thoughts. She had never needed anyone's approval, but suddenly, the weight of Alejandro's world bore down on her. She glanced at her phone, half hoping for a message from him, but the silence was deafening. Her best friend, Lola, burst into the room, her energy brightening the atmosphere. "Hey you, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Fernanda forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's just rumors, you know? Alejandro's ex is spreading lies about me. I can't help but feel like I'm just some plaything to them." Lola plopped down beside her, concern etched on her face. "You're not a plaything, Fernanda. Alejandro chose you. He's with you for a reason, right? But what if she's right? What if I'm just some girl he's using to meet his family's expectations?" Fernanda's voice cracked, and she felt the sting of tears threatening to spill. Lola shook her head adamantly. "You're not just some girl. You bring out a side of him that no one else does. You make him laugh. You make him feel alive. Don't let her get in your head. You need to talk to him." Fernanda sighed, knowing Lola was right. She needed to confront Alejandro, to lay bare her fears and doubts. "I'll talk to him. I just hope he sees me for who I am and not for what she's trying to make me out to be." Back at Alejandro's penthouse, he could no longer sit idle. The thought of Fernanda hurt by the rumors was unbearable. He grabbed his jacket and stormed out of the apartment, determination fueling his steps. He arrived at Fernanda's apartment, his heart racing as he knocked on her door. He waited, his mind racing with what he would say, how he would explain that he wouldn't let her go without a fight. When Fernanda opened the door, her surprise quickly morphed into concern. "Alejandro," she breathed, her gaze flickering with uncertainty. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice firm but laced with urgency. "It's about the rumors." Her expression shifted, a mix of anger and hurt. "What rumors, Alejandro? You mean the ones your ex is spreading? Is that what you want to talk about?" "Fernanda, please," he implored, stepping closer. "I'm not here to discuss the rumors. I'm here to discuss us." "Us?" she echoed, her arms crossing defensively. "What about us? You're trapped between your past and this facade we've created. How can I trust you when all this chaos is happening?" He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand how it looks. I do. But I care about you. More than I thought possible." His voice softened as he continued. "I've never let anyone in, and for the first time, I feel alive. And it terrifies me." Fernanda's heart raced at his admission, but she was still guarded. "Then why didn't you stand up for me? Why did you let her words affect you?" "I didn't know how to handle it," he confessed, frustration evident in his tone. "I've always kept my distance from people, and now that I'm trying to change, it feels like I'm losing everything." "I can't lose you too." Tears brimmed in Fernanda's eyes, her heart aching for the man standing before her. "But it feels like you're still choosing your past over me. I'm scared, Alejandro. Scared that I'm just a temporary distraction for you." "Don't you see?" he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "You're everything I never knew I needed. I don't want to lose you to her lies. I want to fight for us, but I need to know you're with me." She turned away, her hands trembling as she tried to process his words. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can be your shield against your past." "Then let me be your shield," he urged, stepping closer again, his presence grounding her. "Let me fight for you, for us. I won't let her take you away from me." Fernanda turned to face him, her heart pounding. What if she's right? What if I don't belong in your world? "You do belong in my world," he insisted. "I want you there, with me. This isn't just a game for me. It's real, and I want to prove that to you." The air between them crackled with tension, their vulnerabilities laid bare. But the unresolved pain lingered, aching for resolution. "I need time to think, Alejandro," Fernanda whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to figure out what I want." He nodded, his heart breaking at her words. I'll give you time, but please remember that I'm here, waiting for you. I won't let her win." As she closed the door, Alejandro felt a profound sense of loss, but also a flicker of hope. He knew he had to confront his past, to protect the fragile connection he had with Fernanda. Determination surged within him, and he left her apartment with a newfound resolve. He wouldn't allow the shadows of his past to dictate his future, especially not with Fernanda in the picture. He had to confront his ex-girlfriend, to clear the air and make his intentions known. He wouldn't let anyone come between them, not now, not ever. The battle was just beginning, and he was ready to fight. The sun hung high in the sky as Alejandro stepped into the bustling square of Madrid, the vibrant colors of market stalls and the chatter of locals creating a stark contrast to the cold, empty luxury of his penthouse. Today was a turning point, an opportunity to confront his past and reclaim his present. He spotted his ex-girlfriend, Sofia, standing near a cafe, her arms crossed and a look of disdain on her face. She had always been dramatic, and Alejandro had no intention of letting her manipulate the narrative any longer. "Why are you here, Alejandro?" Sofia called out, her voice laced with faux sweetness that only he could see through. She was trying to draw a crowd, to make a scene, but he wouldn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, he strode toward her, his jaw set firmly. "I'm here to set the record straight," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "You've been spreading lies about Fernanda, and it stops now." Sofia laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed against the stone walls. "Oh, please. You think this little charade is going to last? Everyone knows you're just using her to get back at me. It's pathetic." Alejandro felt a surge of anger, but held it in check. "You don't know anything about what I feel for her. This isn't a game to me, and I won't let you tarnish her reputation with your jealousy." The crowd started to gather, intrigued by the rising tension. Alejandro could feel the eyes of the onlookers, their curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. Fernanda is genuine, and she deserves far better than the petty drama you're trying to create. You need to stop this. Sofia's expression shifted from amusement to fury, her eyes narrowing. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? But you're just a lonely billionaire with no real connections. How long do you think this will last? You'll go back to your empty life, and she'll be left holding the bag." Alejandro stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "At least I'm trying to change. You're stuck in the past, clinging to your bitterness. I won't allow you to drag Fernanda down with you." With that, he turned his back on her, walking away from the cafe and towards the throng of people who had gathered. They whispered among themselves, the narrative shifting as they witnessed a man standing up for someone he cared about. Alejandro felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The confrontation was exhilarating and liberating. It was time to find Fernanda, to make her understand how much she meant to him. He rushed through the streets, his heart racing as he recalled the look in Fernanda's eyes when they last spoke. Hurt, disappointment, and a flicker of hope. He knew he had to find her before she closed herself off completely. He spotted her sitting on a bench in a nearby park, her vibrant hair catching the light in a way that made her look ethereal, even amidst her sorrow. "Fernanda!" he called out, desperation creeping into his voice. She looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and wariness. "Please, let me explain." She stood up, crossing her arms defensively. "What's there to explain, Alejandro? I heard everything. You don't have to protect me from her. I can take care of myself." "I'm not just protecting you," he insisted, stepping closer. "I care about you, and I need you to know that what Sofia said isn't true. It never was." "Do you really expect me to believe that?" she challenged, her voice trembling. "You think I don't see the way she looks at you? The way you both seem to share a history? How can I compete with that?" Alejandro's heart sank. "You don't have to compete with anyone. What I feel for you is real. I may have started this as a charade, but it became something much deeper. You've brought color into my life, Fernanda. I can't imagine going back to the way things were." Her expression softened slightly, but doubt still lingered in her eyes. "You say that now, but what happens when the holiday is over? What happens when the truth comes out?" "I'll face it. I'll face everything. "But I want to do it with you by my side," he replied, his voice earnest. "I'm done hiding. I want to be with you, for real, not just as a temporary arrangement." Fernanda took a step back, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she processed his words. "What if you just feel sorry for me? What if this is all a whim for you?" "No," he said firmly. "This is not a whim. I've spent my whole life avoiding connection, and yet here I am, fighting for you. If I wanted to play it safe, I would have kept things the way they were. But I'm willing to risk everything for you, because you make me feel alive." Tears brimmed in her eyes, and he could see the internal battle she was waging. "You really mean that?" she whispered, vulnerability spilling from her heart. "I do," he said, stepping forward until they were inches apart. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." In that moment, the world around them faded away. The bustling city, the curious bystanders. All that mattered was the two of them. Fernanda's resolve crumbled as she stepped into his embrace, the warmth of his body enveloping her like a cocoon. "I want to believe you, Alejandro," she said softly, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Then believe me," he murmured, holding her tightly. "Together, we can face anything. I promise you, I'll always stand by your side." As they pulled back, their eyes locked, and the unspoken words hung between them. In that instant, all doubts melted away, replaced by a shared understanding that they were embarking on a journey together, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a future they would build side by side. "Let's start fresh," Fernanda said, a smile breaking through her tears. "No more pretending. Just us." Alejandro grinned, his heart soaring. "Just us." With that, they turned towards the bustling streets, hand in hand, ready to face whatever life had in store for them. They were two souls intertwined, willing to embrace the chaos, the beauty, and the adventure that lay ahead. Together, they would navigate the complexities of love, their hearts open to the possibility of a brighter future.